I'm super excited to have you on the podcast today. I came across your Instagram page with just some of looking for different foods. For myself, I primarily eat a plant-based diet, and so I'm always looking for different things that people are cooking that I'll be able to eat. And I stumbled across your page, and I was just very intrigued and super excited to have you on and kind of understand your journey with being a vegan and foods and getting into this whole cooking space for yourself.
Yeah, sure. First of all, thanks so much for having me today, Scott. It's a pleasure.
Yeah, excellent.
Yeah, I mean, I can talk a lot when it comes to talking about how I've gotten to what I'm doing right now.
Yeah.
But basically, with becoming vegan, I've been vegan for almost 7 years now.
Okay, I was going to
And
ask how long that
yeah,
has been for you, because I've been doing primarily a plant-based diet for
mhm.
about 2 years now. But it's always kind of been like I've always every time I would have chicken or be like it wasn't that easy, or that wasn't that difficult, I should say, for me to give chicken up. To
Mm.
give, I still occasionally eat some meat, but but it wasn't a very hard thing for me to do.
Yeah, I mean, it's getting easier and easier nowadays. I mean, when I went vegan 7 years ago, it was still a little bit different.
Mm,
But things have rapidly changed since. And I mean, the majority of my life, I was a meat eater as well. So I know
mm,
exactly, what you mean. I mean, I've never been a huge meat eater, but I had a couple of particular dishes. And I grew up in Germany, actually, which is like a heavy, meat-based
yeah, yeah.
cuisine, basically. So it's taken a long time for me to actually go vegan because I kind of idealized it from a very young age. Um,
Mm,
I, in a nutshell, we had some family friends in Bavaria, which is like the more rural part of Germany,
yeah.
and one of them was a hunter. And I remember very vividly when I was 11, to hear like, oh, they've shot a deer and they've come home with a deer, and being at that age, you're like, oh, cute, I want to see the deer. And yeah, and so I saw how they cut it open and how they hung it up, and I saw how they took the liver out of the deer, and then the next day we had liver dumpling soup. And
Mm,
that was the first time I actually vividly made that connection. That cute little deer I was I was wanting to see was
yeah,
now on
yeah,
my plate.
yeah,
And it took, I've never eaten deer anymore since. Even just the smell of that soup makes me sick to my stomach.
yeah.
um but still took a very long time until I made that same connection with other things as well.
Sure. Yeah. Now, and it becomes such a kind of a strange, like when you're eating these foods, was it for you, was choosing to go vegan more of a not necessarily to kill animals? Was it because you liked the way that you felt, when you ate vegan versus eating meat? Like, what was that kind of correlation for you?
I think it's been in the back of my mind for a very long time before I actually did it. And I think one of the factors that it was for me is like once I made that connection of what I was actually eating there, I actually found it disgusting to eat it.
Mm,
But again, I had made that connection for deer, but I hadn't made that connection for so many other animals and so many other products. It just still took a long time until I got to that point. And I just reached this point where it finally clicked. And back then, like 7 years ago now, I was kind of in a rut back then. Like I was in a job I didn't enjoy, and I was kind of feeling sluggish all the time. I never had much energy. So when it finally clicked, it was for me a little bit of a mixture of things. It was on the one hand, always having idealized not eating animal products and not eating meat,
hmm.
and on the other hand, also wanting to do something that's better for my body and actually knowing and understanding what I put inside my body. So it was partially also the health perspective, though I do understand that, going vegan doesn't mean you live healthily. There's going vegan has
There's
nothing to do with being healthy.
yeah, and there's so many different foods that aren't necessarily healthy. It's just it's
Mm.
not, animal based. And so
Let's say it's probably easier to eat healthy on a plant-based diet. It's a little bit easier because you avoid like so many other factors, like the antibiotics and the kind of sicknesses that lots of animals have inside
yeah,
them that you basically consume. So it's easier to avoid those kinds of things. But again, you could also live off chips and chocolate all day and be vegan. So um,
exactly. I for me it was really a matter of just I started to really pay attention to how I was feeling about 6 years ago, and the way that things and the way that my body was reacting to different things that I was feeding it, and I was just really starting to pay attention. And so I noticed that the more that I ate, kind of some of these different foods, then the better that I felt. And I've always loved vegetables. Like that was never ever a problem for me to eat vegetables. I'll eat all of the vegetables. Um, so that I started to just kind of think about that a little bit more, and I
mm,
started to introduce that a little bit more. And then I would do a lot more research on foods and what it was doing, and watch some different documentaries. And then I was kind of already there, and then I was just like, okay, here we go. Let's see what this does. And for me, it's been a life changing kind of event, because I feel fantastic, and there's people who eat meat and they have tons of energy, and so it really, it just depends on you as an individual. But for me, it's been a very enjoyable ride. And it's nice that there's just so many more options right now, 2 years into this than even before. And I'm sure, just like you were saying,
yeah.
7 years ago, this was a lot harder to do than it is today.
Yeah, it definitely was. Like the supermarkets back then didn't really have many options. But also, I think I'm being kind of spoiled because I live like around London now.
Yeah.
But in London, we're kind of spoiled for choices because pretty much every restaurant has at least one vegan option. And back when I went vegan, I knew two restaurants where I could eat. So back then, it was still a little, and both just one option each. So it was a little
Yeah.
bit more challenging back then. But
Yeah.
that's become so much better over the last couple of years.
Now, are you in a place where do you grow any vegetables yourself? Do you, I don't know, depending on people's, living situations, if they're, if they don't have space for it, you can't. But, I've recently I love plants, and I love kind of growing. We have like over 60 plants in the house.
Oh, wow.
Um, and so now we've started to really kind of grow outside, because certainly, the way things are grown, the nutrients that come from, the vegetables that we're eating, and the soil, kind of gets lost, and things like that. So how do you shop and get all of these nutrient dense type of, vegetables for yourself, and different vegan options?
Well, up until about 10 months ago, I lived in London. So we had like a one bed flat there, not really much space to
Gotcha.
grow
Yeah, I
anything.
was just yeah. When you said London, I was just like, there's probably not a lot of green space for you to have a garden.
Yeah. I mean, I grew like little things like herbs, basically,
Yeah.
mostly just basil. I grew on my windowsill and I got really obsessed with doing that but in the winter here, it's so dark and so dull that
Mm-hmm.
like it dies in the winter. But, every spring I start, just propagating all of the basil and just have 1,000 basil plants everywhere. But now we've moved further into the countryside outside of London, and
Mm.
I'm trying to grow certain things, but the weather has been so up and down temperature wise. Like we're
Yeah, it's
still getting
tough.
frost like in the middle of the night, and
Oh,
during
no
the day
kidding.
it's like 15 degrees. Yeah, so a lot of the stuff I try to grow has kind of died a little bit on me. But I've got some herbs out there at the moment. I planted a blackberry bush and a strawberry bush. I've got some chives and some rosemary, some sage, and then I've got some broad beans and some spinach for the first time. But they're
Yeah,
not
that's
they're not out
fantastic.
that far yet. I think it's going to be a while until until I can get anything from it. But yeah,
Yeah.
apart from that, I mean, based on my job as a recipe developer and food photographer, I often um, have to find specific ingredients for the recipes I make. So
Sure.
I try to get them from a mixture of like just a regular supermarket, but also farm shops where they usually have the prettier versions of everything, which is important when you photograph the food.
Yeah, it really
So that's where
is.
I try to get most of my produce at the moment.
Excellent. My sister, we are last year we started a garden. This year, we're gonna have some squash and some a lot more stuff that last year was kind of a trial, and we just went to the store and bought some plants, and then now this year we're growing the seeds that we're gonna eat more versus just kind of what was available, and so just kind of playing around with that. But it was funny. My sister this year for Christmas got me an indoor hydroponics kind of herb garden that has a light. It's got a timer, and so we grew some basil, and so now we're going to have some cilantro. We get some little tomatoes out of it, and so it's funny now that
It's
there's
amazing.
that there's so many fun different options and ways to get fresh stuff, which is critical when you're cooking food and you want it to taste a little bit different. Like it really does add a lot when you start to have fun with the foods that you play with
Definitely.
and what you're eating when you're using some of these fresh vegetables and things.
I've been really enjoying like growing something from the seeds. It kind of like, I don't know, even I'm not so fussed about, eating it in the end, but I'm more like, oh my God, I've grown this.
I love, and
Pretty exciting.
it's funny, even just with all of the plants around the house. I love walking around every morning and seeing who needs water and then seeing who's got new growth. It's so exciting to see new little buds that come up, and I feel the exact same way. Seeing something sprout from a seed
Yeah.
and then taking care of it,
So
growing
satisfying.
it, it's super satisfying. I absolutely love it.
I
I
finally
really do.
managed to sprout a avocado seed. I think it was like the fifth time or so I tried, and it finally worked out.
A friend of mine did that. We've got a little Avi. We call her Avi. We've got a little avocado tree in our windowsill that our friend sprouted for us, and we've been
Amazing.
growing. But it's so fun to do
They've
that
had
now.
these hacks on TikTok where they said like, oh, you shouldn't just pop it in with the bottom into water. You should literally wrap it in a wet paper towel and then put it in a dark place. And I tried that with the last one, and that worked. Within 3 weeks, I had like the root coming out. Whereas the other
Oh,
one that I
nice.
had on water took like 3 months.
Yeah, yeah, and now that you say that, I mean, almost everything that I do to start to get sprout is wrapped in a wet paper towel and put in a dark
Mm,
place. So that
yeah.
makes a lot of sense.
I've got a little
Oh
lunchbox
yeah,
here that I actually use for that because it's perfect.
that's
It just makes
great.
everything in the dark. But yeah, my tomatoes, I'm jealous that you have tomatoes because my tomatoes, I've had them for over a year and nothing has grown on them, just leaves.
Oh, yeah.
I guess it's too cold.
Now, you said that 7 years ago you weren't enjoying work, and you were just now talking about building recipes and
Mm.
obviously now taking pictures and stuff of that nature. So what was that career transition like? So what were you doing before, if you don't mind me asking? And then how did that transition into this this lifestyle now for yourself, right? Because that's really what it seems like it has become for you.
Yeah, sure. So I started studying photography in Germany originally, and then I worked in a photo studio for 3 years over there. It was portraiture studio though, so it was a bit different to what I do right now.
Hmm.
But after I finished my 3 year period there, I moved to London. Gosh, not New York. New York may be next, but no, it was London.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And yeah, when I came here, as an au pair first because working as a photographer in a photo studio, you don't really earn the big bucks, so I
Sure. Yeah.
couldn't just move to London.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I moved here as an au pair. It also gave me the freedom to go back at any point if I didn't
Hmm.
enjoy it. So I did that for the very first year, and then I tried to kick off my photography a little bit here. Though back then, because I was doing portraiture and I was really enjoying music and I was really entwined in the like rock music scene in England or Europe in general,
Yeah.
I started working as a music photographer. But unfortunately, it's very difficult to get to that point where you can live off music photography because
Mm.
lots of bands, especially the smaller ones, they're artists themselves. They don't really earn the big money either, and they can't really pay everyone to, you know, take photos for them. There's too many people also that do it for free because they just love going to concerts.
Mm,
So it was a great time doing that, but it was also wearing me out after a while. And I kind of
sure.
realized that I can't live off my photography. And then I started working office jobs and just did the photography on the side. I worked, my very first job was customer service because the only two qualifications I had was, on the one hand, well, yeah, the photography degree. And then on the other hand, I speak two languages fluently. So I just
Yeah.
went down that way and then used my language in the professional field. Um, and yeah, I worked in customer service for about a year and a half, and then kind of just worked my way up, going to a different company, working then there as a in quality assurance, basically for an insurance company, which was very
Yeah.
interesting, but I learned a lot.
Yeah, you know, I was working for an insurance company before I started this, and you know, I had a vision of insurance before as this kind of like these stuffy old
Mm,
companies and things like that. But the company that I worked for, Hanover, was an amazing company, very forward thinking, very progressive, and had a lot of great opportunities for people to have great careers. And
yeah,
so, you know, it really it wasn't this just this you know, stodgy old, you know, kind of white male type of environment that
yeah.
that people think about.
Yeah, I found it really interesting, even just for the background of understanding how insurances work.
Mm,
And what, you know, even if I now go and get insurance for something, I know exactly what I need to look out for, and I don't need to, like, you know, I don't need to worry so much about not understanding it. So for that, it was really
mm,
beneficial.
yeah, yeah.
And then I worked in for a tech company afterwards, in the travel sector, which was also interesting. I did like a lot of technical bits there. I had a lot of customer contact with different hotels and stuff like this, so that was great. But yeah, in all of that time, because I came from a creative background, I was really missing doing something creative in my
Hmm.
full-time job.
Yeah.
And after I went vegan, that was the first time I really started experimenting in the kitchen and really realizing how creative cooking is. Like for
Mm.
me, before that, it was always just like, oh, well, I need to eat something. Um, and I don't, it still took me a couple of years until I finally decided, you know what? I might just take a proper photo of my food and not just a phone picture. And that's how it all like kicked up. I realized like, oh, I can use my actual camera to take a photo of my food. Uh, and that's how it kind of like developed from there. And then I was made redundant 3 times in a row in my office jobs.
Oh.
Customer service to the insurance to the tech company, I was always made redundant.
Hmm.
And after the last time, I said to myself, now this is it. I'm not just going to go do another office job again. I want to do something that interests me a little bit more. Obviously, I was vegan at the time already. I was already interested in food, and I already knew lots of like small companies from London and around London. And I then managed to get a job as a marketing assistant for a vegan food brand.
Oh.
And yeah, that was really great because I could kind of combine my analytical skills with my creative skills, and you
Yeah.
know, it was in the field I was interested in, so that was really good. And yeah, then started making contacts to multiple other brands through shows and going to lots of events, and then I really kicked off my blog at the same time. And yeah, like after a year and a half, I then decided, hey, I know I just want to create food and photograph my food and share that with people, and that's what I want to do.
Yeah, and it
I've been doing that
really
since.
it's gorgeous. I mean, you know, the pictures, the food, everything, you
Oh,
know,
thank you so much, Scott.
as soon as I saw your page, I was just like, this looks delicious. And I want to make some of these.
Oh, thank you so
Especially
much,
because
Scott. It's great to hear that.
yeah, and especially I think that one of the things that I noticed were something like the desserts, because I love to bake. Like I love to cook, but I love to bake. Like that
Yeah,
is the one thing. But I also sometimes crave sweets too. So like that's just part of, you know, kind of my
yeah.
personality. And so that's why I think baking is just a little bit
It's
more
one
what
of the
I'm drawn
things.
to.
One of the things that also works very well on Instagram because people, like most people, have a sweet tooth.
Yeah.
So whenever you pop something sweet up, they go like, "Oh, can I
Ooh,
have
that
some?"
looks good.
I mean, I have to say, I have like my phases with sweet food, but I'm also a massive savory tooth, if you could call it that. Basically,
Hmm.
I just eat all day,
Yeah,
and
no, it's great,
long
right?
story short. But I've been actually sharing way more sweet recipes over the last 6 months than I had before.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the reasons for that is I haven't announced this on Instagram yet, but my newsletter audience already know. I'm actually writing a book at the moment.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you so much. And it's on vegan roast recipes. So
Mm.
I started working on it since before Christmas, and I've been holding back all of the savory ideas I've had. And now I'm at this point where I'm just like, oh my God, by the time the book comes out, people will be like, what? She's writing about roasts, but she keeps posting all of this sweet food all the time.
All of it. Yeah, that's hysterical.
So yeah, I
So
kind of have to start like sharing some savory things again.
sure. Now, were you always, did you always cook? Like, was that even before? Like, was this something that was a passion of yours? Obviously, photography was, right? Because you've
Yeah.
been studying that, and so photography is this passion, which is great that you're able to bring that into your world and to kind of do that for a living. But was cooking and baking also something that you really enjoyed?
Actually, no. And it was mostly just because, like, up until I was 23, I lived with my parents in Germany, and my mom's very particular and very extremely clean.
Yeah.
So whenever you would even attempt to do anything in the kitchen, she would be like, "Oh, what are you doing now? Like, oh, there's a fingerprint on this." And so, I didn't really have the freedom to
So you
kind of
didn't make the
explore in the
mess
kitchen.
and
Exactly,
and
exactly.
have a kitchen full of dishes.
And then afterwards, the first years in London, I lived in flat shares. So I was sharing it with lots of other people. And,
Sure.
there wasn't really the option to, spread myself out in the kitchen. And funny enough, exactly a week after I went vegan, I moved in with a friend of mine. And then, it's a bit different when you live with one other friend rather than living with strangers.
Of course.
Um, and that's like going vegan kind of forced me to look more into what I'm eating and figuring out what I want to, cook for lunch, cook for dinner.
Well, and probably it made you start to cook your own food
Exactly.
because there wasn't like all of these prepared vegan meals. You can't even just go get
Absolutely.
something quick because most fast food is not vegan. Like it's not
Yeah,
tailored because it's processed. It's got a piece of protein on there, and it's quickly reheated and sent out the door. So yeah, so there's not a lot of options in that space.
exactly. So I only really got interested in cooking and in food after I went vegan, which
Mm.
is quite funny sometimes because I don't know if you know this, but I was on a Netflix/TV show called Crazy Delicious.
Oh
It,
no,
it came out about a year ago. It's on Netflix right now. You can
I'll
look it
have to
up.
check it out. Yeah, no, I will definitely check that out.
And there was some Michelin star chefs that were like the um I wouldn't call them judges. We call them food gods on the show because the show is like a little bit.
Yeah, yeah,
It's
yeah,
it's
yeah.
very American basically.
I understand.
um,
Yeah.
and it was so funny. I remember the day where I was cast for the show, and they could finally tell me who those like chefs are going to be that are on the show. And they told me all of these like names, and they were probably really shocked that I had no clue who it was. But it was because I wasn't interested in food before I went vegan. And after I went vegan, I obviously was interested in vegan food. So I didn't know all of these Michelin star chefs that other
Yeah.
people have just
It's not
grown
like
up
you
knowing.
grew up in this
Yeah,
culinary world where you're idolizing all of these people who have these amazing careers and do all of these amazing things. Great. Like it's,
absolutely.
you respect that people are able to get to a top of their
Yeah.
profession, but you just didn't know who they were.
Yeah, exactly. And
That's all.
especially also growing up abroad. Like,
Oh yeah.
everybody who just people like I see it so many times when I speak to British friends. They just know these random personalities that were on TV, I don't know, 20 years ago, and they're shocked that I don't know them. But they forget like I didn't grow up here, so of course I don't know these people. So yeah, that was a bit of an odd one, but
Yeah. And so how was that experience? What was that like? And was it obviously it was a competition, right?
yeah.
And so how did all of that play out for you?
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. Just going through the whole experience. I mean, coming from a like photography and like also videography that I started doing over the last couple of years, background, I have an understanding how things work, how things are filmed, how scripts are written, how things are organized to make it all come together, how things are cut, and you kind of get an idea for that. So apart from being interested in the whole experience of cooking and being in front of the camera, I was also really interested in just to see how it all works behind the scenes. So that was like exciting from two different aspects. I was the only vegan on the entire show, which was quite challenging.
Yeah.
And I had to cook a cheese dish against two non-vegans. So I don't want to take too much away. So you have to watch
I will watch
Netflix
it. Yeah,
yourself.
I will check it out. But that is
It was
fantastic.
fun.
That's
It was fun. I have to tell though, I drove myself crazy before doing the show. I think I over practiced and I over prepared. And I was so stressed out by the end.
Yeah, you kind of give yourself some anxiety that you don't typically have because you're putting additional pressure on yourself that you really don't need to, because you were selected, and just kind of go and have fun and all of that. But it's hard not to build it up, right? It's hard not to want to excel.
Do your best.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And then when you have a chance to do something like this and you've never done it before, you never know whether that chance will be there again. So you just want to make the best out of it. And if I had to do it again now, I would be so much more chilled out about it.
Like the Great British Bake Off. I started watching that this year, and I was just I went through all 8 or 9 episodes, and my wife was like, "Are we really watching this again?" And I'm just like, "Yes, we are."
I love watching that every year, to be honest. It's such a good show.
Yeah, it is. It is so good, and I started, and that's really when, like this winter, I just did a ton of baking, and with that. I got a cake stand and some tools for Christmas that allowed me to now make some cake, just really start to have some fun with the stuff that I'm making, which is wild, but for me, it's more of, I just enjoy doing it, for like family stuff. It does, I don't have that spark or that desire to kind of like delve into it,
Yeah. I mean, baking, I always consider baking and cooking to be two completely different things. Just because baking is so science-based technically. You need to understand so much of the science, especially when it comes into making bread and stuff like this.
How is this going to react to that? Whereas cooking, it's just like, let's add this flavor if that's the flavor that you like. Like, it's not going to necessarily have like an adverse reaction to what it is that's going in there.
It's not that quickly going to make or break the dish.
No, but if you're making a souffle and you don't put something in, it's like, it's not going to rise. Like, so yeah, 100%.
But it's interesting though. I mean, I've always seen myself to be part creative and part analytical. And baking and cooking in general, because it's a lot of it is science-based, even just how to combine different flavors. And I'm just really enjoying understanding the science behind the food as well, instead of just throwing stuff together, which can be horrible sometimes. So we just experiment.
Yeah, right. Now, do you do mainly things that like you're interested in? Do you get into do people now kind of ask you for certain things and you experiment off of like other people's ideas or sometimes requests?
It's a mix of things. I mean, I usually have a list of ideas. Funnily, I'm looking at it right now. It's sticking on my fridge. I've got little Post-its on there with ideas. But yeah, the last couple of months, I mean, I've been mainly testing and creating for my book. Which has been exciting. I'm almost done with all the recipe testing. And I have to say, after doing so many recipes, all in the same topic, I'm kind of looking forward to doing something else again. So obviously the last couple of months have been a little bit different, but usually I either have like some ideas of using a specific ingredient, and then I think about, how can I use this in a different way to how I've used this before, or how can I create something exciting with it. And then also sometimes, I mean, because I have a food blog, I often also look at what are people actually searching for online, and then go through there and like make ideas based off what people are searching for on the internet.
That's great.
So it's a mix of things. And
and it's amazing how it's amazing how powerful social media is, the internet is, when you can understand some of those analytics of what's happening out there and then kind of tailor things to it. And just the fact that we're talking today is a great well, it's a great testament to um, just how powerful some of that is. There's a lot of negative stuff, and I was just having this conversation with my wife about social media, and
Mm,
I hate it. Like, I do not enjoy social media for the aspect that it takes time away. It takes valuable time away from people if you
mm,
let it. You know what I mean? But on the flip side, on the work side, and on the advocacy side for myself, like, social media is a very, very powerful tool because I can reach people, I can share information about Alzheimer's, which affected my family, which is a great place. But then it also allows me to connect with people from around the world that I would never have the opportunity to connect with, that I would never have the opportunity to understand this part of what people do for a living, that type of a thing. So it is a very, very powerful tool. And I think that it's just like with anything else, there's positives and negatives to everything. And,
yeah,
and there certainly is a negative component to social media, but I love it for this aspect
yeah,
because it's a great way to find information. It's a great way to gather information. It's a great way for me to look to you as an expert in this vegan field to say, great, here's somebody doing the work for me. And now I can just take a recipe that looks delicious and I can create it at home. So thank you for that.
But I definitely have a love-hate relationship with social media as well. And it might not always seem like it because social media is a big part of my work, but I seem to go through phases of either feeling absolutely inspired by what I see online to, on the other hand, feeling stressed out by, feeling like, oh, I haven't shared
Sure.
anything today. I need to share something.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, it's definitely a love-hate relationship there, but I'm just trying not to judge myself for it too much. If I feel stressed out with it about posting, then I'm just not going to post, and that's just what it's going to
Yeah,
be.
yeah, no, that's great because you have to take care of yourself.
Yeah,
You have
to
to
stay
take care
sane.
of your mental health, like all of it. And sometimes you just need a break from it, and that's not
Yeah.
bad. Yeah.
And I think being somebody that works on social media, you so often think like, oh, if I'm not going to post for a week, people are going to wonder like, what's going on? But honestly, like most people don't even realize if you don't post for a week. I mean, I have
Well,
seen people be like, oh, I'm back. And I was like, I didn't even realize you were gone.
yeah. Well, and a lot of times people will like something that from a post like maybe 2 months ago, and then all of a sudden it's refreshed on somebody's page. So just because you didn't post anything doesn't mean that stuff of yours is not being seen, it's not
Yeah,
relevant, it doesn't pop back up on somebody's page. So
exactly.
yeah, so you can take a little bit of a break, and I think that it's healthy to take a little bit of a break for yourself every once in a while. We can't
Yeah.
always be on and be glued. It's healthy. It's healthy to put the phone down and go do something and not pick it up and not be tied to it and not be um so yeah, no, that's
Yeah,
great.
definitely. I think lots of people that work on social media just kind of tend to burn themselves out with it as well, because there's
Hmm.
such a pressure to, continue to grow your accounts and to continue to, engage and create a community. And for that, and obviously you need to continuously create content and post out content. And it can be very tiring. It can be
Yeah.
very tiring. But I think
Yeah.
in the last year, I found a good balance where I'm just not too harsh with myself if I don't feel like it for a couple of days. And I often take spontaneous days off social media where I still go in and look at what other people do, and I look at, let them inspire me. But if I'm not feeling like sharing or creating anything, then I'm just not going to share or create anything on those days. And that's just taking that freedom just feels really good.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And that's just a great kind of metaphor for everyone out there that, like, whatever your profession is, we all need a break at times, and
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
and and take that for yourself. Now, do you have like any piece of advice for people who might be just starting to step into either kind of a vegan lifestyle or a plant-based lifestyle, or anything away from eating meat? Like, was there something that you did when you first started that allowed you to um kind of thrive in this space? You know what I mean? Like, make
Mm.
sure that enjoy the foods that you were eating while getting all of the nutrients that you need.
Yeah, I think when I went vegan, it was kind of a little bit different to how most people do it. I see like most people kind of transition over a longer period of time with small steps, which is great. But, different things work for different people. I think for me, I probably in the background slowly transitioned over years, in my mind. And it
You
just
had
needed
been
that one
mentally
moment.
transitioning, and then all of a sudden, when you made that
Yeah.
choice, it was like, okay, day one,
Yeah.
I'm done with it.
Yeah. So technically, I went from omnivore to vegan overnight, but
Yeah.
I also understand, it's unrealistic to do that for most people. What kept me going in the beginning is just finding something new and exciting, and like, learning about, okay, what's actually in my food and what are the vegan options that this supermarket has, and going around and finding new things, and also getting really excited about trying to create my own dishes in the kitchen, and
Mm.
creating different recipes, trying out especially different cuisines. Like, I've been so stuck on what I was eating before going vegan. I literally just ate German, Italian, and American cuisines. And I always had the same dishes on rotation pretty much.
Yeah.
And afterwards, I started really experimenting and going into so many different flavors. So that's really what kept me going in the beginning. But for somebody wanting to transition, I would also say, don't be so harsh on yourself, especially in the beginning. It's
Mm.
most likely not something that you can just do overnight, and don't try to strive for perfection. So even if somebody just starts, just maybe try to eat vegetarian 1 day a week, and then maybe you start doing 2 days a week, and then maybe you eat vegan 1 day a week, and you slowly over time it'll become easier and easier, because we are people with habits, and it'll become easier and easier. And I think for most people, this kind of transitional, the slower transition probably works better than trying to do everything perfectly from one day to the other. And
Yeah.
I believe me, there's no vegan police. So there might be people that think they are the vegan police on Facebook and on Instagram, but there is no official vegan police. So.
It's so true. And for me, I'm fascinated also, for me, the human body reflects nature in a lot of different ways. When you look at like the markings on your hands, you look at your lungs and kind of trees and stuff like that. And I think that, it makes sense to, when you really study the fact of like, we expel CO2. CO2 gets absorbed by the plants in the soil and then creates new food that we then take in, that allows. So it's like it really is a whole system that
Yeah.
works together. And when I started to kind of think that way and understand that, I was just like, okay, well, you know, maybe we're not just all omnivore, you know what I mean?
Mm.
That maybe that there is this side, and then yeah, like I said, I started feeling a certain way, and I was like, okay, I enjoy the way that I feel, and I'm going to try to do this more. That was
Yeah.
it,
Yeah,
and
definitely.
and for me, it was really just more of like, okay, well, I had a couple of foods that I knew that I could go to, and like I started it off with my morning. And so I went from having a traditional breakfast to now a smoothie of like almond milk, some spinach, some pumpkin seeds, some hemp seeds, some
Oh my gosh, so
fruits.
healthy.
And it was amazing, right? Like, and I love it. And it's such a, and not only that, but now this shake is, it's got tons of nutrients, tons of calories, and it was a great way to start the day. And
Yeah.
I was like, I love that, and that became a staple for me.
Mm.
And so it's just, I think that it's a matter of, again, just, yeah, finding the things that you like, that you enjoy, and how do you work them into your world, and just pay attention to yourself. How do you feel when you eat these things? And,
Yeah.
once you start to pay attention, you start to like, okay, well, I could do this. This feels good. And you get more energy. And I find that I have a lot more energy now than I did
Yeah.
before. So,
Absolutely. That was one of the things for me as well. I mean, I'm always careful with, mentioning this to people because there's something so individual. But I
yep.
kind of just felt before that my brain, I just had constant brain fog. Like, I
Mm.
couldn't think clearly. I couldn't concentrate. I kind of felt my head was somewhere else. And after I made that transition, I kind of felt like I'm here, I'm right now, and I know exactly what I'm doing and what I'm thinking about. And it just became so much clearer afterwards.
Yeah.
So
No,
yeah.
That's great. And so I'm really, I also want to just obviously talk a little bit about your page because it's beautiful.
Thank you.
And so, so how did all of this kind of creativity kind of come into play? I'm looking at your page, I'm looking at a gingerbread house, which is amazing, as well as some pancakes with you know, that are drizzled with icing. And so, you know, how did, you know, because obviously your photography allows you to be able to understand beauty, right? And to be able to put things together. But that's completely different when you start to bake because
Mm.
and cook to get things to look amazing and taste amazing is truly an art. So for one, you know, you know, you are a true artist in your photography and your food. And so how is that for you? Was that an easy process for you to just kind of start with, or did that take a lot of time to kind of perfect and understand and just be able to do?
Yeah, well, it's definitely like a longer process. It's not something that you just wake up and know how to do perfectly one day. Obviously, you know, having the photography background, it kind of helped me understand how to edit pictures, how to photograph, how the camera works, how light works, and also just having a good eye for it to be able to tell what looks good, what doesn't look good, and to be able to tell, you know, why something looks out of place. So
Yeah.
that obviously was really helpful. Though photographing people I used to do is very different from photographing food. Even just
Mm,
alone, you know, the space that you photograph in is so different.
sure.
Um, but it's lovely, you know, you don't have to tell food to smile. It smiles automatically. So it has its benefits. No, I think the other creative parts, I mean, the kitchen is one thing. Learning how to cook and learning what kind of flavors to combine is one thing. And then the other thing is kind of learning how to style the food to make it look delicious. And
Mm.
it's definitely been a process. Like if I look back at my pictures from like 6 years ago or something, you know, the very first food pictures I took, it's like, oh my God, what did I even think of? Or how did I even think that decorating it like this would look nice? I don't know. It's a process, and you
But
only
you
learn
know,
it
and
through.
I was just going to say that is a great representation for people because, you know, where you are now is completely different than when you first
Mm,
started, as it
exactly.
should be, right? Like there's no there's no way, and it would be bad if you were doing the exact same thing, you know, however many years later than you were, you know, 7 years ago when you
Yeah,
first started this process. Like that would mean that you didn't grow. And so, you know, I think that it's good for people always to just be reminded that whenever you start something new, you have to learn, you have to evolve, and it's never going to be, you know, that same way. But you have to start, and if you didn't start, then you wouldn't be able to get to, you know, these
exactly.
beautiful, you know,
It's a long
pictures and food.
process, and the only way how you can learn it and get better at it is by just doing it. And I
Hmm.
sometimes go through phases where I kind of feel I'm uninspired and I don't know how to make this look good, or I sometimes have phases where I just for weeks feel like I'm struggling with how I want to put my lighting.
Mm,
um, but I get over it and I'll just continue to create. And that's like the best way of how you can break through that cycle about feeling like you're not creating anything new or not creating anything special. And not every single work that you do is going to be groundbreaking.
yeah,
That's just
yeah.
the reality of it. You know, you maybe take like 999 photos that are average, and then there's one there where you really go like, wow, how did I even do that?
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
there's a balance there. I think obviously the things I post on Instagram, they're like the best images I post. You know, I don't post all of the 200 photos that I take of the same picture that didn't make it.
Yeah, yeah, of
Um,
course.
so obviously it's my work as well. So, you know, I want to put the best work out there and not
Yeah.
the average one. But that's just the realistic part behind it. You know, not every shot is brilliant. And what pictures often don't show is that it takes hours to get to this one photo. It looks so easy to just take a photo of a dish, but in reality, you know, you need to research, you need to think about how you're going to photograph it, you need to think about what kind of props you need, what kind of ingredients do you need to make the dish, you need to figure out how to style it, even just oh, what background am I going to use,
Yeah.
what
Well,
kind of
because
vibe am I.
I would imagine sometimes the dish doesn't turn out the way that you want and you have to do it all over
Mm,
again, right? Like, I
exactly,
mean,
which
you
can be
know,
super frustrating. I actually recently I made a cranberry nut roast in like a wreath shape. It was for my book. And ironically, it took me 2 days to make it, to get it to the point where it looked good. And I was actually Skyping with my best friend, and I wanted to show her how it turned out. And by holding it into the laptop camera, it fell onto my laptop and I had to start all over again.
Oh no.
Yeah, these things take a lot of time and
These things
perspective.
happen, and yeah, that's horrible, and I'm glad you're laughing at it, because what else can you do but
Yeah, I
cry?
couldn't
Because
change
it's
it. So
like it's these things are going to happen.
yeah,
That's
they really are. Things that, like, every now and then there's just things that just don't turn out well. And that's why I love having the freedom to experiment in the kitchen rather than just having fixed ideas and fixed projects that I take on. I mean, yeah, I do work with a lot of brands as well, not just on my blog, but also completely separately, where I create photography for brands that they can use on their website or on their
yeah.
social media. So it's great to kind of leave my own creative space in between as well, where I can create whatever I feel like creating rather than just going by schedule. So
Yeah, and I would imagine, so 7 years ago, when you kind of transition into this lifestyle, and then think about, kind of a career shift, what was, how nervous were you, or what was that feeling of saying, okay, I think I'm going to do this for a living?
mm.
That's it's a scary feeling to kind of take that leap. And so, what was that like for you?
I think back then I was working in a marketing job when I made that decision. And one of the reasons why I made that decision is because I was just really frustrated with the job. The job itself was great, but I just felt the communication in the company wasn't really good. And it was frustrating me for like the year and a half that I worked there. And I'm quite happy that it did frustrate me so much, because I finally got to this point where I just thought, like, okay, I got to take this into my own hands now. Obviously, I didn't want to just switch to another job where, I would be working with other people again, and maybe they work in different ways, or maybe they communicate in other ways, and just having that kind of friction all of the time. And I
Hmm.
kind of felt I wanted to work for myself. And at that time, I'd already started doing photography for brands on the weekends.
Oh, okay.
Um, so by the time I made that decision that, okay, I've had enough now, I'm just going to go and do my own thing. Um, one of the first things I did is I bought a laptop, because I had a really crappy old laptop before, and I realized I can't work with this laptop, if it takes me an hour to edit one photo.
Yeah.
Um, that was one of the things I invested in, and then everything else I did was basically just calculate out, okay, I've got 3 months notice, and this is how much money I'll be getting in. This is how much money I'm going to have to spend on rent and on these kinds of expenses. And I basically just did a lot of calculating around and just seeing how much money I can put back just to have a little bit of a cushion. And then as soon as I made that decision, basically every blogger event I went to, every food show I went to, I spoke to everyone, and literally everyone I knew, I told them what I'm about to do. And through that, I actually managed to get my first clients, and they were brands, that I had contact with before, that then, we could do something together, we need pictures for the website. And that's kind of like how it started. And I was actually surprised how easy it turned out to be. I mean, I was
Mm.
anxious in the beginning, not so much before I went freelance. I was kind of looking forward to it. But I also knew, if it doesn't work out, I'm just going to go and get like a job at a supermarket and sit there until, it's fine, or doing that part-time or something like this. I know from my personality, I'm always the kind of person, I'm going to make it work.
That's
And if you
awesome.
never put yourself into that situation where you have to make it work, you're never forced to actually see what you can do.
I love
Um,
that. That's fancy. That's a great sentence right there.
it really pushed me to figure out how to do things. And in the beginning, when I went freelance, I was a bit anxious in the first couple of weeks, but it was because you have this mindset going to a 9 to 5 job. You calculate roughly, okay, this is the amount of money I earn within a day. And in the beginning, I was saying, oh my God, I didn't do anything today that earned me money. And it was like, I was getting really anxious about that. Nowadays, I sometimes have 2 weeks where I don't work on any projects that make any instant money. And that's just how it is.
Hmm.
So you get a bit more relaxed with it. But in the beginning, it was a really weird feeling.
Yeah, which is fantastic, and it's such a great inspiration for people to be able to realize that we can take this place that we're at and we have the ability to move ourselves in the direction that we want to
Yeah.
and do things that give us enjoyment and fulfillment
Just
and
have to
not.
go out your comfort zone every now and then.
Yes, you have to get out of your comfort zone because what does comfortable do for you? Really,
Yeah.
not much. It doesn't.
Keeps you where you are.
That is for sure. That is for sure. And so, as we're coming up on our hour, I don't want to take up too much of your time. I really appreciate the time that you spent with me today. Um, when you look back on all of this, what's maybe the one or two things that you're most proud of?
Ooh, that's a difficult one.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm really excited and proud that I managed to get a book deal. So that's really exciting. It's just one of those things I always thought wasn't really realistic for me to do. I don't know. I always thought, it would take 10 years until you get to that point where you can publish a book with somebody. So that's definitely something I would say I'm proud of, though. Feeling proud of something is always a difficult thing because on the other hand, I also worked hard for it for a couple of years. So,
Yeah.
am I
As you
proud that
sh-
I
and
worked
that's
hard?
yeah, and it's a natural culmination of everything that you've been doing. And I think that it's also important, really, that's a great point for people, is that like sometimes we give ourselves these kind of expectations or these parameters, right? Like I can't get a book deal until 10 years from now, until I have all of this kind of content. And then, here you are realizing that it doesn't necessarily take 10 years to be able
Yeah,
to do that. And so letting go of an expectation of when something should happen versus just saying, I want this to happen and I'm going to do everything that I need to make that happen. And whenever
yeah.
that timeline happens, it happens.
And it's also good to realize that you can ask people for information, for their experience, and for advice as well. Like, um, if you want to, for example, publish a book in something, just contact the publisher and ask them, well, what would it take? Where do I need to get to? What are you looking for, when you're looking to work with somebody, just so that you have an idea of what you're working towards. And if you then realize that maybe working towards this goal is you're not really ready to do that work, then maybe that's not the right thing for you. Then
Yeah.
maybe, your calling is in something else.
Yeah.
Um, and, I've always been really open in sharing my experience and sharing information with other people that do something similar to me. And I think that's really great to build kind of like a community of people that, get what you're doing because they're doing a similar thing
Mm.
and share information. And people are like, so many people are happy to share and give ideas of, what you need to do in order to get to a certain point.
Well, there's space for everybody. And so
Yeah.
the more that, and I tell people all the time, like, this journey of ours is ours alone. So we get to roll this boulder up that hill, and it's ours to move, but we
Mm.
can't do it alone. We all need help. And there isn't any single person that goes on this journey that doesn't need help from somebody. And I think that just even understanding that we wouldn't be alive if somebody wasn't taking care of us in the very
Mm.
beginning. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And more than likely, we wouldn't be alive if somebody wasn't taking care of us at the very end. And so it's foolish of us to think that we don't need somebody taking care of us in the middle as well. So we
Yeah.
all need help. And it's just a matter of being able to ask for it. And it's also, you know, it's easier to ask for help when you give a lot of help, right? Like when you're
Yeah.
willing to help people and not stingy with your information, then you realize that I have my lane and I'm comfortable here, and I'm gonna ask for help when I need it so that I can keep moving forward.
Yeah, exactly. One thing that's important, I like kind of like that visual of moving the boulder up the hill.
Yes.
One thing I always think is important, and that for the longest time I didn't realize, is nobody is coming to tell me to move that boulder forward.
No.
I need to move it forward myself. If I don't have the push to move it forward, then nobody's gonna come and tell me
It's
to
time
move
for
it
you to
forward.
move the ball. Yeah,
Yeah, exactly.
100%. It is it is your journey to take. But
Yeah,
again, we all need help along that journey.
yeah,
But yeah,
definitely.
nobody's going to push your boulder up the hill. It
Yeah.
is only you. And so some people never make it off the ground. Some people get to the top, and it's really just a matter of understanding that it is only yours to move. Nobody owes you anything. Nobody, is here to rescue you. You have to rescue yourself.
Exactly, exactly. As I say, nobody's gonna come. Nobody's gonna come and tell you to get off your phone and get out of bed.
Yeah.
You have to do that
Yeah.
yourself.
Maybe you should make a recipe today like that. It can only come from within inside. Or if you hire a coach, that helps you a lot. But excellent. Listen, Rami, I think this is a great place to kind of stop. I think that it's been an amazing conversation. It's been
Yes,
so much
definitely.
fun getting to know you and having this conversation. So I truly, truly appreciate your time, and I love what you're doing. I love that you've kind of followed this passion for yourself, that understanding of what you and what was best for you, and then making that change, and then taking that change into something that you can just enjoy and have fun with, and just be your true authentic self, which is really amazing. And so keep doing all of that. Keep being an inspiration for people, and please keep sharing your food because it looks delicious, and I'm excited to make some of these dishes.
Thank you so much, Scott. Thank you so much for having me as a guest. It's been really fun chatting with you.
Excellent. Same here.